Good morning and good afternoon to anybody who has received the link to join on to this webcast. We put together some materials to hopefully communicate a little bit more about this exciting prospect that we've been working on out in the Yukon territory called Pike Warden. And I hope to kind of go through some of the highlights of that project to further fill people in about why we're so excited about this opportunity. But before I do, we also have company CEO Scott McLean on the call from the Roundup. And I think he wanted to provide some comments himself. So over to you there, Scott.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. Hello from Vancouver. It's a nice rainy day here. I'm at the Roundup. It's for those that aren't here. It's a pretty good conference this year. Lots of folks, and we're here for the purpose of trying to find partners for some projects. But as Greg's mentioned, we're quite interested in advancing a couple of the projects on our own. One of them is called Maud Lake, where we put out some nickel results on that. It's an Ontario project. And the other one that we've had some great success on and see some a lot more work to do internally is called Pike Warden. Just to remind everyone, we will have forward-looking statements, and anything we say you should take with a grain of salt and do your own research. As you know, Transition Metals has operated mostly as a project generator. We've kind of advanced that model over the last couple of years, where we are willing to put investments into projects and take them to a further stage. And that gives us the optionality of being able to maybe acquire a better deal, leverage the project up, or even continue to take it further down the road. And those two projects we've chosen, as I mentioned, for this year are Maud Lake and Pike Warden. Next slide. The capital structure of the company is very tight. We've been in business since 2009, went public in 2011. And unlike other traditional juniors, we have a very tight share capital structure with only 57 million shares outstanding and a few options. Our current price sits at about 10 cents. It was close to 10 cents yesterday. It gives us a very poor market cap valuation compared to our assets of a little over $5 million. When we look at the company, we've only ever raised $10 million. We've spent closer to $40 million through the company through time, and have amassed a good bundle of valuable assets. If you look at the hard assets, we have cash and marketable securities. We have about $1 million in cash and about $4 million in marketable securities, which equals our market cap alone. That doesn't give us any. We get no value for our royalties, our milestone payments, or any of the projects we have. We have a good bundle of securities that we have in the company, as we sell some of these from time to time to fund the company, but also look to get higher values from them if we're following them. You may have saw some interesting news from SBC Nickel, one of our spin-out companies, yesterday. We're very bullish that stock will improve in pricing very quickly. Our holdings in that company alone are 9.3 million shares. We have another slide. Yeah. Right. So this just gives you a bit of a perspective of the projects we have across the country. A bundle of projects out in the Maritimes, which include gold and copper projects. A real nexus of projects in Ontario, nickel, copper, PGM projects. We have some gold projects as well as a tungsten project. Large sediment hosted copper project in Saskatchewan, a couple of gold projects in BC, uranium in Northwest Territories. And what we're here to talk to you about today is our new, it's put in there as a silver property, but really it's a silver gold epithermal system is what we think we have here, and we may have a tiger by the toe. So on that, one of the purposes of today's webinar is to give a broader a more detailed look at Pike Warden beyond the bonanza silver grades that we disclosed last week. So I'll pass it over to Greg, who will go through the technical part of this presentation.
Thanks, Scott. Now I'm hoping everyone can hear and see me. And see the screen. So yeah, I'm very happy today to go through a project that we find are finding very exciting, that we call the Pike Warden copper gold, gold silver copper project, which we think is a pretty exciting emerging epithermal system in an underexplored corner of the Yukon. To get into a bit more detail on that, it's in an area that's actually fairly easily accessible in the Yukon, close to Whitehorse, but is an area that's been overlooked for many years. That being said, recent work in the property has led to recent discovery of multiple zones of high-grade gold, silver, copper, and lead mineralization within a 37 square kilometer property. And, it's this occurrence of new high-grade mineralization that piqued our interest to look a little bit further into the project. And I'll get into the details of that, but basically our first year into the project, we were rewarded with some very encouraging results. Initial programs of outcrop sampling and follow-up on some of the zones that I'll talk to you about in a bit more detail return, very good grades, 11.8 gram gold, 12,000 grams silver, up to 5% copper, and off the chart lead in a few locations. And this all occurred within a property that had never seen really any history of prior drilling, any kind of systematic evaluation. So that work culminated in the fall with a first ever program of drilling completed on the property, which returned some significant widths and grades of silver mineralization, which I'll go into in a bit more detail. Picture on the right is just a shot of the very light reverse circulation drill hole that we brought in October, and the very competent crews and help that we got out of Yukon, allowed us to do this project really effectively, safely. Property location, where are we? We're 65 kilometers southwest of the border of Yukon, close to the border of British Columbia. The property itself consists of 37 square kilometers of mining claims within the traditional territory of Carcross-Tagish First Nation. The property is located fairly close to a known gold silver system known as the Skookum Creek gold deposit, which is being advanced by a company called Whitehorse Gold. History goes back some distance. This particular region was within very close to portions of the country that would have been combed during the early days of the Klondike gold rush. But a characteristic of these epithermal systems in this area is that appreciable amounts of free gold were really not recovered from the drainage system. So the early prospectors kind of moved on to greener pastures. But looking at this again in the 1980s, the GSC went through this area, completing regional scream sediment samplings, and really highlighted that there actually was quite a lot of anomalous gold, silver, and base metals kind of draining from this region. So that new data attracted a period of exploration in the 1980s, which led to the identification of the Skookum gold deposits that Whitehorse Gold is advancing, and led to a small amount of production from the Skookum gold projects, around 80,000 ounces in the late 1980s. And work at that time also led to the discovery of 3 showings that are identified in the current property border area. However, no follow-up exploration programs were ever really of significance were ever completed on these projects. Roll the clock forward, I guess it would be 40, 50 years, and the next generation, has a look at this data. And I have to give credit to the gentleman on the left, who may be uncomfortable with me putting his picture up there, but a very talented young Yukon geologist named Ryan Burke, grew up in Yukon, was looking at these areas and identified that this area really did need another visitation. And he actually staked some claims and brought it to the 2020 Prospect Generator Challenge a couple of years ago. And his submission, in a forum of his peers and other industry leaders in exploration, was the winning submission. And with funding he was able to receive from this contest, he was able to leverage this, obtain other sources of funding through the Yukon Mineral Exploration Program to complete 3 seasons of field work on the property, consisting of prospection, soil sampling, and geophysics. And certainly want to give Ryan credit where credit's due, because with the resources he had, he was able to identify more than 18 high-grade polymetallic showings that had never been really documented properly. And that's really what led to our interest in the area. So in June, we were able to enter into an option agreement with Ryan towards earning an interest in the project. From a geology perspective, very simplified geology of this part of the country, the oldest rocks in this region are Proterozoic gneisses of the Nisling terrain. So these are these are very deformed, high metamorphic grade rocks that are in this area extensively intruded by late Triassic to Cretaceous intrusions of the Coast Plutonic Suite. These are in turn in this area intruded or overlain by Eocene rocks of the Bennett Lake Volcanic Complex, or the BLVC. So those would be the rocks in yellow. The red dashed line tries to highlight basically the circumference or boundary of what's been identified as one of the principal kind of volcanic caldera complexes that is interpreted to have fed this volcanism, called the Bennett Lake Caldera Complex. And note that our property is situated on the northern margin of this 30 by 20 meter collapsed caldera structure area. So the Bennett Lake Caldera Complex is known. It's responsible for the eruption of these Eocene volcanic groups. It's also a known event that hosts the metallogenic events associated with the epithermal gold and silver deposits of the Mount Skookum Creek area. Our focus, however, has been on the property much closer to where we think a more prospective environment is, near the rim of this major volcanic caldera complex. Zooming into the property scale, what are we seeing? Well, in general, the north part of the property is underlain by Cretaceous, granodiorite to dioritic intrusions of the Coast Plutonic Suite. And whereas the southern portion of the property, is cross-cut by the yellow rocks. The yellow rock that sort of has a dashed line going through it is interpreted to be a volcanic ring dike that intrudes a collapse structure demarcating the approximate boundary of the Bennett Lake volcanic complex. What we're observing, and what Ryan noted, was that mineralization on the property, and there's extensive showings, seems to have spatial associations with a series of east-northeast and east-west trending structures, with clusters of the mineralized occurrences coming together, where you're kind of having intersections perhaps between the volcanic collapse structures and these northeast structures. The other observation was the style and the character of the mineralization on the property changes at different areas on the property, and that it's our speculation that what we're seeing is different levels of exposure of mineralization within a larger system. As an example, on the far southwestern part of the property is an occurrence called the ERT Zone. So the ERT Zone is it consists of extensive kind of replacement style sulfides and black sooty sulfur salts replacing volcanic rocks that are clearly associated with the Bennett Lake volcanic complex. So in this area, what we're seeing is widespread silver mineralization with elevated gold, copper, and lead. But at present, the principal minerals that we're seeing there are silver-bearing minerals, where this was the area where our bedrock chip sampling returned, where we were able to expose at 42 meters of almost 64 grams silver, with narrow intervals getting up to higher grades, 7.8 meters of 170 grams, 0.7 meters at 539 grams. Basically broad zones of elevated silver. And on the right, I present the David Rise diagram, which seeks to simplify the various depositional environments that can occur within a volcanic hydrothermal system. And at present, the setting that we're seeing from the ERT deposit seems a bit more consistent of what you would see in a high sulfidation gold epithermal system. So the little call out at the top is trying to identify, where in that system you might see deposits of this style. Whereas if we go further to the northeast on the property, there's a plethora of high grade vein occurrences, narrow, brittle veins, often elevated with high levels of base metals, which were enriched with bonanza grades of gold and silver. The style of mineralization is very similar to what they're exploiting and pursuing up at the Skookum Creek mine, and are more typical of more intermediate epithermal vein systems. But what are we talking about? These are narrow veins returning 2.3% copper, up to that amount of copper, 9.8 grams gold, 200 grams silver, more than 20% lead. One of the new occurrences that we discovered in bedrock this year in the summer was one that we called ACPB, Archer-Cathro lead zone, which returned values up to 11.8 grams gold, 29 grams silver, and almost 4.5% lead, with the picture in the left showing kind of the crustiform veining, and the black color is mostly, in that case, lead and zinc. So very good zinc numbers too. But back to the rise diagram, where in the system would you be expecting to find that? Well, kind of the area with the red call out points down to, the sort of a deeper level of exposure in the system, where you might seek to find these things. So the showings we're seeing kind of fit in the context of what we think is a big system, and we're still at the early days of really trying to figure out where each of those zones sit and what their full potential is. But the thing that we're excited about is these kind of systems have the potential for hosting huge deposits. The replacement style epithermal deposits can be very big. The narrow, brittle, infilling mesothermal things have bonanza grades of gold. So that's what's got us excited, that we're seeing these things. I mentioned porphyry copper. Why do we think there's a porphyry copper potential on this particular property? Well, in the older Jurassic rocks that host the system, there is a number of things that come together that are favorable indicators for porphyry copper systems. One is there is pretty widespread indications of propylitic style alteration. This would be the fairly widespread deep-seated alteration that you would need developed around a porphyry copper system with epidote. We're seeing it locally becoming more enriched in potassic alteration with hematite and magnetite, where we're starting to see copper numbers coming up. We found in a few locations rock types which include a variety of different intrusive breccias, some of them with vein inclusions, which again are positive things to see of disruption and hydrothermal activity in this environment. And then the copper. Across the property, there are very widespread occurrences of copper with elevated molybdenum, which is a very different kind of mineralization signature than we're seeing with these more epithermal style veins. The map on the right tries to layer a few of these things together on a big scale just to kind of contemplate things, but the green box kind of highlights where, using the hyperspectral aster imagery, which is pretty coarse, kind of limited application in this area, but certainly highlights an area where there is an elevated propylitic alteration signature. The red areas that are highlighted come from a radiometric survey highlighting areas where the potassic alteration is higher, and the dots in the middle are basically where we're seeing elevated copper. So these three things are all sort of coming together within this environment as well. That is something that we need to pay attention moving forward on the property. Recap the work, I'll go fairly quickly, but probably the most interesting prospect that we looked at this summer from a perspective of, being at a stage where we could follow it up in some manner was the ERT showing. So the ERT showing was that replacement style silver, high silver gold epithermal thing sitting in the volcanics to the southwest. And we identified that there was some historic sampling around this that certainly indicated the gold was there, but we didn't really have a way of systematically sampling across this to get a sense for what the what the grade distribution was, what the controls or mineralization were. So, as you can do in this area, we were able to, with a crew from Archer Cathro, strip and expose about a 40-meter section of this down to bedrock and conduct a systematic sampling across the zone. So the little sketch at the bottom is a hand-drawn sketch from Steve Israel, one of the Archer Cathro geologists that helped us in an instrumental fashion on this property. Steve, very familiar with these deposits and areas, and yeah, basically the whole channel ran elevated silver. There, we were not out of any kind of silver zone, but what we identified was within this zone, a lot of the high grade silver was focused in fairly steeply dipping shear zones that we noted had an orientation around 70 minus 65 that we probably could trace and target. And with that in mind, we felt that we had some capacity to maybe follow these things up with some drilling. This table presents, it was actually included in a release we put out in October, includes the results from the channel sampling at ERT, which I think I've mentioned a few times, but also summarizes some of the highlight grab and chip and channel samples from the other zones as well. But back to the drilling, noting that those shear zones were fairly well defined, we felt that maybe the next step would be to see if we could confirm that that those zones of mineralization and the orientation on the controls of the mineralization at depth with the first ever drill program ever attempted on the property. And we did this through a fairly light mobile RC program. So RC is collecting chips and it has capacity to drill at different angles down to sort of modest depths up to 100 meters. And we mobilized the drill in with the objective of trying to get a representative sort of drill hole cut at depth across this exposed zone of mineralization that was in the ERT, that was sampled by the ERT samples. And basically we were rewarded. All three holes hit significant widths of high grade silver, including 16 meters of almost 94 grams silver equivalent, with shorter intervals, meter and a half of 488, almost 483 grams silver, 21 meters at 104 grams silver, again with higher grade intervals over a meter and a half, which is the standard sampling interval for the RC drills of almost 400 grams silver, and another hole 12 meters at almost 53 grams silver. Showing where the holes are on this next slide, present a plan view and a cross section really of the drilling, with the section A prime situated such that the section on the right is kind of looking to the southwest. The yellow rocks are volcanic rocks. The blue dashed line represents what we think is a fairly major structure bounding the Bennett Lake volcanic complex in the south from these Jurassic aged intrusions to the north. And the zone that we're sampling is situated about 70 meters south of that context. So it's an interesting environment. I'll show this slide to kind of put this in context of what the opportunity of this particular zone at ERT could be, noting that ERT is only one of 18 zones that we've identified. Basically, the photo on the right-hand side has superimposed the section that you viewed on the last page, representing the geology kind of going through the hill. And the two mineralized zones that we intercepted with the drilling are basically focused within that circled area, pretty close to surface. And the two main shear zones that we think were intersected were ones that were exposed just below in the trench, about 70 meters north of that contact. This is a view of the hillside. And what I've done is I've attempted to highlight a number of other mineralized structures that have a similar orientation to the collapse structure and the structures hosting the mineralization that we've sampled at surface. There has been no systematic sampling of any kind on the rest of this hill, but we feel that there is good potential that some of these other mineralized structures could also be mineralized. One clue, if we look on the image at the left, is I basically contoured a few things here. The map itself is showing on a backdrop of the magnetics, the higher magnetic signature of the granodiorites to the north and a lower magnetic signature of the volcanics to the south. Along that contact, that east-west trending line, which we think is a major bounding structure, there is a very elevated soil anomaly. So there was a limited amount of soil sampling done on this area back in the 1980s, and basically those samples taken from that survey are indicating where you're getting multi-gram silver in soil anomalies, which is quite spectacular. In fact, we're getting those kind of anomalies up where we've done most of our sampling at the top of the hill, but there's, like I said, there's been no systematic sampling elsewhere. But to my view, that widespread of a soil anomaly cannot be fully explained by the known source, and suggests that there's certainly an open 800-meter long trend that is meriting some more follow-up work to hopefully expose other mineralized structures. And again, this is sort of you're still just grappling with the scale of the system. These are mineralized structures that are part of, probably a much bigger system. These epithermal systems, if they're rich in silver with a bit of gold at surface, tend to become more gold enriched as you get deeper and potentially copper rich. So it's a very kind of exciting start, at least with this zone. But next steps, again, it's kind of early days on this property. It's a large property. We've got, like I said, other known mineralized zones that haven't received any kind of follow-up testing. And there's actually large portions of the property still that just haven't had kind of like the base level of data collection required to kind of characterize them as well. But one thing we're doing is kind of a cutting edge approach right off the bat is we've engaged with some consultants, Elisa Van Loon and Neil Banerjee from Western University, who are really leading, I would say, leaders in the application of synchrotron analysis, which is a new approach to kind of use cutting edge, high intensity light beams to basically at an early stage recover a host of physical, chemical, structural elements of the minerals that we're seeing across the property, including things like clay speciation and such, so that at an early stage we can have data sets that further characterize where in the system are we, which way should we be heading, and we're very excited to see how the results of that work will proceed, which should be getting some preliminary results coming from that soon. There's a lot of data. Geophysically, the property has a good quality mag radiometric product on it. We think there's some more things that could be done with that data, such as mag inversion and leveling and that sort of thing, so that we could help utilize this stuff towards building more of a 3D kind of model for what we think is going on with these systems. So we're planning to do some of that. In terms of next year, we have some plans to consider doing some higher density hyperspectral imaging. Property scale LiDAR would really benefit from that. But really, we're just anxious to get back there on the ground. Property would really benefit from another summer field program to enhance our understanding of the geology, collect more rock and soil samples, and highlight more areas, better constrained areas in preparation for drill testing. And of course, we need to go back to the ERT zone and follow up on some of those other structures that just need to be sampled. And ultimately, this is the kind of project that we're trying to, move these things forward so that we can identify and potentially test some of the better drill targets on this property moving forward. So that's a view of the project. feel free to get in touch with us if you have any questions.